They walked into my cabin like it belonged to them, opened drawers, snapped photos, and even laughed. What they didn't realize was that every second of it was being recorded in HD from 6 different angles, and I watched it all unfold from 200 miles away. Here's what happened next. But first, let me give you the full picture, because context matters. About 3 years ago, I bought a small piece of land, around 4 acres, roughly 2 hours outside the city. No neighbors within half a mile, no noise, just trees, stars, and silence. I built a simple off-grid cabin myself, with solar panels on the roof, a rainwater collection system, a composting toilet, the full setup. It wasn't luxurious, but it was mine. Now, this part is important. Keep one thing in mind as I tell this story: the camera system. I'll explain exactly why I installed it and what it captured before we're done. Because what those cameras recorded turned out to be far worse than I initially realized when reviewing the footage. But first, you need to understand how this HOA situation even began. People don't just break into someone's cabin without a buildup. There were warning signs, ones I may have ignored for too long. My land falls within a rural HOA. I know, off-grid and HOA sounds contradictory, but when I bought the property, the rules seemed reasonable. Maintain your land, no commercial use, basic stuff. Then new leadership took over. The new HOA president, let's call him Gerald, already had a reputation. Neighbors told me he'd been trying to push out several property owners who didn't match his vision for the community. Soon the letters started coming. First about my solar panels being visually disruptive, then about my rainwater barrels being a mosquito risk, and then, believe it or not, about my tire swing. I responded to every letter in writing, documented everything, and kept copies. I even had an attorney review my responses twice. Here's the thing about people with a little authority and a lot of ego: they don't stop when you comply. They escalate. And keep this in mind. At this point, Gerald had never stepped foot on my property. That was about to change, and he had no idea what was waiting for him. It was a Tuesday. I was at my apartment in the city working from home. At 11:14 a.m., my phone buzzed. Then again, then 3 times in rapid succession. Motion alerts from the cabin. Here's why I had installed such an extensive camera system. About 6 months earlier, someone had stolen tools from my land. Nothing major, but enough to shake me. So I upgraded security: 6 exterior cameras, 2 inside covering main areas, all connected to a local NVR with cloud backup, everything time-stamped. I opened the app. 2 vehicles were parked at my gate. One I didn't recognize, and Gerald's white SUV. I knew it from HOA meeting photos. My gate was locked with a chain and padlock. I watched live as Gerald and another man, later identified as the HOA's so-called compliance officer, cut the chain with bolt cutters. Let me repeat that. They cut my lock and walked onto my private property. They stayed for 22 minutes. They tried the cabin door. It was locked. One of them circled around and attempted the back window. They took photos of everything. Then they left a notice on my door claiming I had violated 4 HOA codes. I sat there in my apartment watching it all, barely breathing. I didn't call the police right away. I wanted everything documented first. And this is where things got worse, and better, at the same time. When I reviewed the full footage later that evening, I saw things I hadn't caught live. The compliance officer tried the window, then reached into his pocket. On camera, you can clearly see him attempting to manipulate the latch. He gave up after about 40 seconds, but the intent was obvious. Even worse, while Gerald stood on my porch, he made a phone call. I couldn't hear it live, but my exterior mic picked it up clearly. He said roughly that the place looked abandoned and that they should move forward with the next step. The next step, on my legally owned, actively used, fully permitted property. That night, I made copies of everything. Cloud backups, external drives, USBs, one for my attorney, one for a family member. And then I did something Gerald never expected. Instead of calling him or sending another letter, I contacted the sheriff's department and my attorney. Then I waited. 2 days later, Gerald emailed me demanding I attend an emergency HOA hearing about my non-compliance. He gave me 72 hours to respond. I replied in 4 minutes. I'll be there. Please ensure all officers are present. I have materials relevant to everyone attending. That Saturday, I drove to the community hall with my laptop, a printed timeline, and a USB drive. I also brought my attorney, which Gerald clearly didn't expect, judging by his face. There were 7 people in the room: Gerald, the compliance officer, 3 board members, my attorney, and me. Gerald started by presenting his evidence, photos taken illegally from my property. I let him finish. Then I opened my laptop. Before we discuss any violations, I said, I'd like to show the board something. I played the footage. The bolt cutters, the gate, the attempted break-in, the phone call. All of it, time-stamped, clear, undeniable. The compliance officer turned pale. One board member actually said, "What did you do, Gerald?" The meeting collapsed in under 10 minutes. Gerald tried to argue they had inspection authority. My attorney simply placed a copy of the state trespass law on the table. No words needed. Here's what happened over the next 60 days. Gerald and the compliance officer were removed from their positions in a 4-1 vote, Gerald being the only vote in his favor. The sheriff issued criminal trespass citations to both men, not arrests, but official charges on record. My attorney sent a civil demand letter. We settled out of court for an amount I won't disclose, but it covered all legal costs and funded the second building I'd been planning. The HOA issued a formal written apology, the first in its 22-year history, according to a longtime resident. And my tire swing? Still there. No one said a word about it since. Here's the takeaway. None of this would have been possible without documentation. Cameras, records, written proof. The law was always on my side. I just needed evidence. People ask me if off-grid living is worth the trouble. My answer is this. The real challenges aren't the land. They're the people who feel threatened by what they can't control. Gerald didn't break in because of solar panels or a tire swing. He did it because he couldn't push me out. And once the truth was exposed, everything fell apart. If you're building something, off-grid or not, document everything. Cameras, records, dates. It's not paranoia, it's preparation. If this story meant something to you, subscribe. I share real stories from this journey every week, and tell me in the comments, what would you have done in that meeting? I'll see you in the next one.